Hello, everyone. This is Jose Palomino with another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And our guest today is Justin Coutu, President of R&D Technologies, and they are specialists in one of the hottest areas in all of manufacturing, additive manufacturing, otherwise known as 3D printing, but they do it at scale. They get involved with the technologies. They do it as a service bureau, and they've been doing it for a while. And we're going to get into Justin's journey leading their company and also how their company shifted strategy to be able to enter this new market and actually leave behind another business that was also thriving to be able to fully embrace this strategy. So do not miss this episode, and let's welcome Justin to our show. Welcome, Justin, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thank you, Jose. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. We love, as longtime listeners of our podcast now know, we love interviewing owners and leadership teams of the companies that we often bring on experts who provide the expertise on maybe how to do things like strategy, marketing, sales, and so on. But we like to talk directly to the people who have to implement those things and live with those strategies.
Sure.
So why don't you maybe just as a start, just tell us a little bit about your business as it is today. I'm going to get into a little bit of the history and a little bit of the future. But today, just tell us your company and what it does and who you primarily serve.
Sure. So R&D Technologies, we are primarily a additive 3D printing based company that deals with both the selling of the equipment of Stratasys is our OEM. So Stratasys is basically the OEM for FDM technology, fused deposition modeling, as well as polyjet matrix. So two different technologies we might cover a little bit later on. But so we are a full line reseller for Stratasys, as well as a full, what they call a GMN, Global Manufacturing Network, or service bureau backed by Stratasys. So people who don't necessarily want to bring machines in for specific reasons, they will come to us to provide them parts business. So on top of that, we also provide the services for the machines, as well as we provide materials and design design assistance as well for CAD modeling.
Right. So somebody is thinking, let's say somebody in, I don't know, for the sake of argument, somebody in aerospace, they make a plane, and up till now they've been working with a hinge assembly that's made up of 17 discretely welded together parts.
Sure.
And they say, we should go additive. Is that the kind of stuff that you might prototype or actually build for them?
We might add to that as far as their design and manufacturing processes with components. So if people come to a lot of aerospace and defense contractors will come to us if they're doing for non-flight critical type parts. So stuff that sometimes they have a hard time machining, takes a lot of material costs, things along those lines. We will talk with them with regards to certain models that they're going to be putting together. If it's concept modeling, jigs, fixtures, tooling, end-to-arm tooling, stuff like that, that will help them within their design and manufacturing process and on the floor itself. So yeah, we're not necessarily full-blown production, but what we will do is we do work with thermoplastics, very strong production thermoplastics in the range of like Ultims, Anteros, things like that are basically certified for aerospace specifics. So yeah, we do quite a bit of work with those companies, but again, it's not flight critical stuff that we're working with them on. They come to us generally for purposes of just, hey, we need some real tooling advice, and we need to know how to get this equipment, how to get these parts in the hands of our engineers quickly and more efficiently than just machining it.
Hey, pardon the interruption. It'll just be a beat. We want to tell you about something that's really exciting, and it might be very exciting to you if you're the owner, CEO, leader of a B2B company, roughly with $2 to $20 million in revenue, and you feel a little bit stuck. You know what I mean? Sales are a little flat, maybe even declining, challenged. Margins are being squeezed. Sales cycles seem to be lengthening, and lead flow is uncertain. We've designed a program based on over a dozen years of us doing exactly this for many B2B companies. It's called the Competitive Edge Program, and you can learn more about it at valueprop.com/edge. Tells you all about the program. It's a 90-day program, really focused on helping you sharpen your value proposition, aligning your value delivery, making sure your marketing program is doing what it has to do if you're in B2B, which is generate opportunities, and make sure your sales process is tight so that you can convert those opportunities into sales. So with that note, let's get back to another exciting episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. Okay, so now something that we had a previous conversation on this topic, and I'm just fascinated by it because the work we've done with the MEP centers around the country, and
Hmm.
I mentioned to you like 10 years ago or something, they said it was the age of additive. It was the year of additive. It was
Sure.
everybody's going to be 3D printing. We'd be 3D printing planes and cars, so
Yeah.
that was going to happen. So
Not there yet.
that didn't quite happen quite that way, yet you guys have built a business around this technology.
Right.
As I understand it, basically not only marketing one of the leading companies that make the big production class additive printing machines,
Sure.
but you also provide service bureau services for that. So tell us a little bit of how that came to be, because you didn't just wake up last year and say, hey, we're going to get into additive. I'm assuming
No.
there's a little bit of a journey there. Could you just tell
Yeah,
our listeners a
absolutely.
little bit about that?
100%, Jose. So we started back in 1998 or so, where we were coming out of 2D into 3D. So we started off as like an AutoCAD company, basically working in 2D drawings, and decided that we wanted to start working with SolidWorks, which was kind of the curve, the wave of the future with going 3D CAD software. So we determined over the years of working in SolidWorks and seeing a lot of customers working in something called SLA, which is sort of like the generic term for like a Kleenex, if you will, for stereolithography or 3D printing. So we started kind of getting involved in additive manufacturing, I want to say in 2005, 2006, shortly before I came on board. And we saw that was a very good complement. So when you start working in 3D printing and you start working with 3D additive manufacturing parts, it's a good fit. And a lot of these customers want that as part of their processes. So we ended up becoming a partner with a company called Object Geometries, which was a company based in Israel. Object Geometries, about a few years after we joined them, merged. There was an acquisition with a company called Stratasys, who we are with now. And Stratasys is sort of like the biggest leader right now in the industry in additive manufacturing. We decided that we wanted to put sort of all of our eggs into the Stratasys basket, and we sold our division of SolidWorks off to focus strictly on additive manufacturing as not just as a reseller or a partner for Stratasys, but also a service bureau, or they call it a GMN, a global manufacturing network.
So let me just get into
yeah,
that for a second here, Justin, because I think it's a really interesting part here too, especially anyone listening who's like an owner, right? So here you
Yeah.
are, you had a business that was pretty high tech, SolidWorks, I mean, 3D, modeling and
Yeah.
stuff. It's pretty cutting edge stuff.
Right.
And then you start seeing something, and were you on the leadership team at that time?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're part of the leadership team, and you're looking at, okay, this stuff is still happening. It's not like 3D modeling went away, but you saw a different opportunity. And you said something very interesting, Justin. You said you put your eggs in that new basket.
Mm.
Now, so that's a really interesting thing from an owner's point of view. Like, what signals were there? What kind of thought or conversation was it? It said, hey, we're doing well in this basket, but we're going to actually shift to a whole nother basket that's like a lot newer.
Right.
That's a pretty big move. So I just like, if you could just tell a little of the background kind of, that couldn't have been an overnight decision, I don't think. I mean, there was some thought behind it.
Yeah, it was very, there was a lot of thought put into that. So yeah, very good question, Jose. So yeah, when we were at that stage where we saw 3D printing really taking off. So we saw that industry, we saw now that we had PolyJet, which is a completely different technology that we were on board with first, merged with Stratasys, who was our competitor. So Object Geometries and Stratasys were merging together, totally two different technologies. One of the biggest juggernauts in the industry, who we were our biggest competitor. Now we were going to get to sell that product and be able to bring in that kind of technology within our facility and be building benchmarks and parts for customers. So we were really excited and said, geez, now you're putting two of the biggest players in the industry together. And we're going to get to be part, and we're there at the very beginning of it, which we found very, very exciting. On the other hand, with SolidWorks, we've been part of them for quite some time. And we saw them taking a bit of a different turn. They were, focusing on strictly sort of larger dealers, being specific in trainings on, routing and, DLMS and all kinds of different aspects of their software. So it was a very costly move to make into SolidWorks and keeping our 3D printer business going. So we figured that, why don't we it's hard to answer to two masters, as it's hard to sit there and make numbers for one, make numbers for another. And, it's tough to focus and be great on a couple of different things. We want to focus on one thing that we could do really, really well. And we had the in-house capabilities of the right engineers, right application engineers, right technicians, and sales reps. So, and then now it was just a matter of trying to find out how to market everything. So,
well, that's not a small part of the equation, right?
no, a very big part of the equation.
Yeah, because even if it's somewhat related, or these are first cousin prospects, first cousin applications, they're not the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I found, over the years, business leadership teams sometimes underestimate something that's on the adjacent lane, and they say, well, how hard can it be? It's almost the same. Well, almost the same is not quite the same, right? So,
No.
So I'm curious, that transition with your team, and you had a team at that time, and so some people who maybe had a lot of like security, job security, personal psychological security in doing what they were doing.
Sure.
Now you're asking them to do something different. How did you navigate that transition? Because a lot of owners sometimes have to make big changes, and they have to bring everybody along, or most everyone along who can make the journey with them.
Sure. So yeah, we were in a different situation we had already kind of positioned people within our company at the time when we had both under our umbrella, SolidWorks and Object. We said, okay, these people are going to be focusing strictly on Object. These people are going to be focusing on SolidWorks. So when we divided the company and we ended up selling the company, the people that were strictly with SolidWorks, we discussed with them, do you want a position with us moving forward into 3D printing? Are you willing to make that transition and learn? Or would you like to stay within your field of expertise, and grow with a larger company that is purchasing us? So we gave them that option before we just said, hey, by the way, we're doing this, and seeing as that you've been a SolidWorks expert for a while, see you later. No, we gave them the option to say to stay on with us. But also when we were purchased, they said they wanted our employees. Our employees are very valued, part of part of the acquisition.
Sure.
So, and employees are everything to the company. Without them, you have nothing. So, with that, they knew who these guys were. They were big players in the industry. So the company that purchased us said, listen, we want certain players on this team. So that was difficult, but yeah, we made that split. We made it pretty staunch. And I think that most people dealt with it with a good deal of alacrity. So they were dealing with changes for sure. We were moving locations. We had to set up a shop. As where we didn't before, everything was sort of virtual and phone and tech support. But now we needed to bring in some of these larger pieces of equipment, and now it's building up a capital equipment expenses. So there was a lot involved in that as well, without boring you into the details of how we financed it and budgeting and all that other stuff. But yeah, very good question. But yeah, we had to we positioned it so our employees, most of them had a real decision in where they were going to go.
Okay, and yeah, so it makes sense that somebody's really, even in the industry, seen as a major like SolidWorks expert, they're going to get paid as such, versus transitioning to something where they're not number one maybe. And you gave them a good option there. So that goes to the issue of also, and you said this, a company without employees, what is it, right? So I want to talk a little bit about values, right? So as a business builder, and I know from talking to you and your team, you're still growing, you're still looking to grow, you still have fire in the belly to, you see, I mean, who knows how big that world of additive and 3D printing and so on is going to be in 5, 10, 15 years, right? So great positioning there. But values is something that helps people understand like what kind of people you want to be while you're doing the doing.
Yeah.
So how important, or how have you communicated values to, still being privately held as a company? How do you communicate that to your team in a way that doesn't just feel like there's the plaque, read it, and then we move on?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, our employees are reviewed every year, and we're a small team. I mean, we only have anywhere from 15 to 20 people at all times with an internship program. So our employees have a voiced opinion in every single action plan meeting. We have one every month, and then we divide meetings into sales structures and service applications and GMN. So everybody gets an opinion here, and everybody gets a voice. We work together as a team when we do any kind of project, not just working with trade shows, not just working with the marketing side of things, but as a whole. So everyone sort of has a benchmark as to where they know where they sit and what they're doing. Numbers aren't the only thing in the company. Sure, they matter when it comes to sales and how we're doing on the bottom line and looking at a P&L report and a balance sheet. But when it comes down to how we are overall with morale, it's we do quite a few things as an activity with the company as a whole that kind of gets them to be able to express how they feel about certain directions within the company, how they feel about their role within the company, and what direction that we're going with, as far as what we're investing in for future technologies, marketing, and every other kind of really, higher level expense. So we're lucky that we are so small and that these guys are all my friends and neighbors, a lot of them, so it's, I get a great overview of who they are, who their families are. We have open house events, we have cookouts, and it's great just to know who they are as a person. But we vet these people pretty well before we even hire them. We have a general understanding of, what kind of background they have and solid family foundation. The most important things here are is family first, obviously. And to make sure that you're happy with what you're doing, because if you come to work, you're not happy and your family's in trouble, you got some problems, your performances are going to be well off, as you well know. So one of the nice things about a small business, unlike we're not 200 plus people, is I talk to these guys every single day. I'm shoulder to shoulder with them at every trade show, shoulder to shoulder with them at every demo open house. I go on calls with all my sales reps to any informative site visit. So it's great, and I'm in the car, right? Because I don't like to drive to all these places anymore. So I jump in with the sales reps. So, but yeah, no, it's great. It's,
well, what's interesting though, so you think, okay, like you said, 15, 20 people, but as you grow and as your industry grows and expands and the equipment, all the applications for your technology are going to just increase, not decrease, the different things. Probably there's probably applications today that weren't even really thought through that much 10 years ago, right? So there you go. So things change. So you reach a point now, you're not 20 people, but you're 50, or you are those 200 people. What do you think it's possible to keep that kind of positive culture in a company at that size?
Sure. I mean, it has to be. They're doing it. It's being done successfully with a lot of different companies that are out there. Even locally on, Rhode Island levels, we're primarily a New England based company when it comes to our partnership with Stratasys, but, US wise, we're a much larger conglomerate with the different GMNs. So we get a chance to see a lot of larger scale companies that are a lot like ours do things successfully. Now, you need a lot of help doing that. That's one of the things that we are not out of tune with, is that when you become much larger scale and you bring on different levels of management, you need a partnership. You almost need to grow, not so much organically, but inorganically, and kind of seek the right people to help you, whether they buy in and have equity into the company, or whether you purchase it or purchase another company that is doing the right things that are drawing parallels with yours. So that's sort of the future that I look at, is who are these people that I want to reach out to. I have a lot of people, a lot of connections within this industry that I value their opinions. I value their friendship and their business relationship with me, that I constantly am running things by and constantly talking with them on. I'm on a couple of different board of directors as well, where I do get to ask those difficult questions, is when I want to get bigger, and that time is coming because we're adding different technologies within our shop. What are the hurdles, and how do we get by that? And there's quite a few, but I see a direction now where when you bring in the right people, and I don't take on everything like I do now,
right,
and I kind of layer it out, it can be done, and it can be done properly. And again, it's something that you still have. There's a lot of time and hours that are put into that, but it's something that I don't have the answers to all that, to be honest with you.
No, of course not. Yeah, it's interesting, but what's really fascinating, Justin, is just the way a couple of things. One is, even now you're having those conversations. I mean, maybe not the main part of your conversation, but you're having those conversations and you're observing who's there ahead of you in scale, right?
Yeah.
That you say, okay, they're doing it well. They figured it out. They've done some things. And what was interesting also, you mentioned that sometimes that's about finding the people who are doing things the way you want things done now, because it's a lot easier to get somebody who's already like swimming the way you want them to swim instead of
Mm.
teaching them a whole new stroke. Also, you bring in somebody who says, this is a high potential, has a rough attitude, but we'll work on that. Well, it's very
Sure.
hard to re-engineer people, as you know. So it's a lot better to start off with the people who are already lined up and aligned with what you want to do, the way you want to function, and so on.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the next kind of area that I'm really interested in just observing. And this is a little less about your business specifically, but about your customers. And of
Mhm.
course, I don't mean naming any customers, but just broadly speaking, what do you see your customers' biggest challenges? Whether it's not necessarily related to additive, it could be, but what do you see their biggest challenges? Like when you look out at the customers you need to grow with in support, what do you see them worried about?
Yeah. So, no, good question. So again, we are a very different, unique industry in what we do. So, tying into last question a little bit as well is we are lucky that these people that I'm talking with, my customers, are also involved in the same industries and are, pretty much powerhouses in here and have a great understanding and an overview of what the problems are that are out there. We see it all the time. The customers actually do see some of these problems, and sometimes they put the blinders to it. First and foremost is that they're not going out there and they're not running the proper internship programs and not bringing in younger talent that have a better understanding of additive manufacturing as a whole. So what happens is they get stuck sort of doing more traditional technology, more traditional manufacturing, and they get stuck doing that. And they're not bringing in the right people that can influence them, or maybe they're just not listening to them. They have seen a big kind of wave move in the world of additive manufacturing, another problem. And that wave was opening things up to hobbyist level machines. So once FDM, fused deposition modeling, Stratasys, created that technology, once they lost their trademark on that and the patent ran out, every smaller Tom, Dick, Harry company started producing these smaller hobbyist level machines. They weren't supported. They didn't have the backing they needed to continue with them. You were on their own with the machines themselves, and they were open source. So you're letting put any materials through those machines and letting it run, which basically is a breach of contract on a lot of higher end machines, which you run into some problems with. Not on all, but on smaller level machines, you run into that. So when these people were saying, well, why would I purchase something that's $1,500 to $300,000 when I can buy something that's $4,000? Well, the problem was those aren't proven machines. And so they'd be buying these hobbyist level machines and then they get a bad taste in their mouth because they would be working properly. And if you want to run and have a piece of equipment that's going to be the pivotal part of your design and manufacturing process and help you make a better product faster, less expensive, less waste, and get a concept of beta out to market faster, you need something that's going to be a professional industrial machine. Relying on hobbyist level stuff can be a very dangerous curve. So that's one of the problems that people have been going out there buying these hobbyist level machines saying, is this what we're looking at for the future? So that was a big, stalling point. Another stalling point for customers is that they're getting beat to market by customers that are adapting to this kind of, technology. Big problem is that they're out there and they're saying, well, I've been doing this way. I make a great product. Their product is great. But the problem is they're not doing enough iterations. They're not producing new product. They're cutting back based on, economic issues, cost of goods, things along those lines. And they're not producing as new product. They're just kind of relying on their older things. And that's been a problem. And they're getting beat to market by newer product that people are risking it and taking the opportunity to recreate something or to bring something completely new to the market in the industry. Now,
so it sounds just, Justin, just to recap a little bit,
yeah.
It sounds like then for a lot of the customers you serve, that category of industry that you work with, the rate of innovation is not slowing down.
No, well, during COVID, it did a little bit for sure.
Right.
But
that was like a speed bump in the macro view of the world.
Yeah,
that was
point, yeah.
Right.
No, it's not slowing down. You have to continue. You have to keep moving. You'll be out of business if you don't. If you're not producing a product or something that somebody wants, and you're not especially curving it to what we're doing now with this time, everyone wants to buy something online. Everybody wants to have it quoted online, and you better have it look nice. It better be ready to go. And that's one of the things that we do. Like, if you're Burton Snowboards, you're not going out there and producing a binding and hoping that people like it and buy it. No, you're prototyping it. and you're
Right.
doing it over and over and over. And then you're not going to production with it yet. You're prototyping it. You're making it look like the end use product. You strap it to a pro's board. You go up to the mountains. You take a bunch of pictures of it. You put it into all your catalogs, your magazines, your online sites. You bring it to your trade shows. Then when you see that the public likes it and you start getting orders, you go to production with it. You don't start mass producing something unless you know you have orders behind it. And that's where that's where additive manufacturing comes in, is that we are out there making parts well before it even hits the market. So we know exactly what somebody wants. They come to us. They need design issues. They have design issues. They need help with that. They need to know how to part orientation for parts. What's the best way to build 3D printed parts? Things along those lines are part of our services. And our customers sometimes don't know they have problems with that.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because educating or helping a customer see something they cannot see is one of the hardest things to do in any kind of marketing, business development, or sales. Because
holding their hands,
because the first reaction is always, "Oh no, we're good," and you say, "Well, wait, you may be good now, but here's what's happening in your business. This is what's happening." And in your world, Justin, so much of what you're doing is literally the cutting edge of manufacturing, right? It's what's happening now. And I love the fact that you brought it back together, that it's manufacturing. It doesn't exist for its own sake. It's ultimately to make a product that can be marketed. And the way you describe with the boards, how your processes or the technologies you deal with help somebody with a good idea really get to that a viable or minimum viable product much quicker. They can fully test it before they make all the commitments to like scale production, which is always going to be very expensive to set up and go.
That's right.
On so many levels. Well, Justin, this has been fascinating for me. I love this topic. I do have one last question to ask you, actually two quick last questions, but one that may take just a minute to answer, which is this. Putting your hat on as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, and many of our listeners are fellow mid-market, B2B CEOs, leaders, and so on. Is there one tip that you might share with them that you think would be useful? Like if you're running a business, something that's worked for you that they should remember as well. Love to hear from you, from your perspective, one tip you could give a fellow business owner or CEO.
Listen to your customers. Listen to your customers. Be quiet at those meetings. And if they invite you into their shop, listen, walk their floors, understand what they're doing. Let them explain to them what's made them different and special, and get an understanding, because that's the best I can tell you. It's always take the opportunity to visit your customers, walk their floors with them, and hear what they're really saying. Because they won't tell you, but they'll say, in other words, what they might need help with. And you're going to be able to take that. And we sell solutions, right? We're not just selling them, we're here to provide solutions. So we can't provide a solution unless we listen to what they're asking us for. So
wow, that is age old and always going to be great advice. And yet, especially in technical categories, in my decades of experience, I find that people all too often violate that simple principle because they're so anxious to tell somebody about how good their stuff is.
Yeah.
And you're saying, listen to your customers first. You'll have plenty of time to tell them about how great your stuff
is. Sure,
you
can brag all you want about what you can do for them in the next level. But yeah, if it's taken me a long time to figure that out. I worked in a lot of different industries prior to signing on with my father and becoming an owner and operator here. And that's it's extremely important to get that lesson. And sometimes it's hard for people to kind of zip it and and take, and by the way, take and listen and take some advice too. Take some
that's great advice. So Justin, if somebody wanted to learn more about you and your firm, we'll have it in the show notes, but if they're just listening, where should they go?
So rndtechnologies.com. So it's www.r, N like Nancy, D like David dash rnd-tech.com. So so they can go right on there. And I will actually, I'm going to give you some other ones as well. I don't have them with me currently. I apologize.
No worries. We'll have them in the show notes, but the primary one will be rnd-tech.com. Fascinating. Justin Coutu, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your owner's journey.
Oh, Jose, this has been a pleasure. Thank you. Great questions too, as well.
Hey, thanks for listening to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. If you like this episode and if you like the series, make sure you subscribe below. And also, if you liked it, please do review it. When people are looking for something exciting to listen to, especially the kind of content we're bringing, which is practical insights for B2B companies, this is a place and a free resource that they can take advantage of. Let them know about it with your review. So subscribe, review, enjoy. Thanks again.